Welcome to Season 7, Episode 28 of Beyond the Zero. I'm your host, Ben. Joining me today is Beau L'Amour. Beau is a writer, and today we're here to discuss the work of his father, Louis L'Amour, and this Lost Treasure series, which is being released by Bantam. Welcome to the show, Beau.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Thank you for joining me. You're joining me from Los Angeles today. Tell us just a little about life over in Los Angeles.
It's been better.
Mm,
I think Los Angeles is going downhill a little bit these days.
okay.
And as you know, we've had some fires and things,
Yeah.
but this used to be an absolutely wonderful place, and maybe somebody will get it back. Somebody will get it back together.
Yeah. How's the recovery from the fires going? Because I talked to a couple of people earlier this year whose houses got burnt and things like that.
I They seem to be clearing things very quickly, but
Mhm.
I don't know what that means in the long run. I
Mhm.
don't know how they're going to finance rebuilding. I kind of have this sneaking suspicion that wealthier people may eventually go in and buy up more and more lots so they
Mhm.
can have much larger lots.
Mhm.
That may be the only way to get the Palisades rebuilt, because the property is worth so
So
much and
much. Yeah.
insurance is so high.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure that there were quite a few fairly, for Los Angeles, middle
Mhm.
class people that lived there, because it in the old days it was kind of outside of town. It
Yeah.
took a while to get to any place where you'd work.
Mhm.
And that was before a lot of the movie business moved into Santa Monica and
Mhm.
things like that. And so it was bordering on a modest neighborhood, some of it. And unfortunately, just for the character of it, I think that may go away.
Mhm.
But because the only way to get it rebuilt may have to be by people who kind of just don't care about insurance.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. It's going to be an interesting question in the next year or two.
Yeah. We had a weird thing here in Australia with areas that were very flood prone, and there was one
Mhm.
particular city that was just consistently getting flooded. And basically, because insurance was so extremely high, it's yeah, either the people who I don't know if they had money, but they pretty much just had to move the entire town down the road because yeah, that was the only thing they could do because no one could afford the insurance. And yeah, so
I can remember walking through downtown Brisbane and seeing these plaques on the side of the building that said things like, "This is where the flood of
mm,
such and such a year came to."
yeah, yeah, crazy. I want to ask you a bit about your work in just the Hollywood industry and what you do regularly because obviously we know a lot about, Trump worrying about film tariffs and all these other crazy things at the moment. But tell us about your work in film and some of the other things that you do.
So I haven't worked in the film business in a while. I'm kind of getting back into it, just
Mm,
just right recently now. But I studied at California Institute of the Arts. I studied film there, got out of school, worked on all kinds of productions as everything from a truck driver to an assistant editor. Ended up doing a fair amount of uh, location sound work,
yeah.
and then got a couple of opportunities to be uh, producer, finally writer producer, and then once that happened, went back into the publishing business pretty much
Mm,
full time
yeah.
until just recently. So I kind of have a history in film, but it's not my career at the moment. I mean, we'll see what happens in the next few years, but it's not my career at the moment.
Yeah. And tell us about this film that you made out in Australia called The Diamond of Drew.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a kind of a interesting story. It definitely gives you some perspective on kind of breaking into the Hollywood scene and things like this.
Yeah.
So I'd been working in the business for a while. I was kind of ready to give it up. I didn't like a lot of the people that I had run across. It's extremely cutthroat.
Mm,
Publishing is much more relaxed. I was doing very well there, and I basically run the Louis L'Amour enterprises. I run the aesthetic end of that. My mom kind of runs the financial end,
yeah.
and I do the kind of creative and aesthetic end. And I've been doing that for quite a few years and was ready to just push the movie business stuff aside.
Yeah.
But then a man that I had worked with in the past and had a very good relationship with called me up and he said, I'm working with USA Cable and their plan is to do a couple of movies in every genre.
Yeah.
And they want to do like a Indiana Jones kind of classic old high adventure story. And
Mm.
he says, I thought you were the guy to come to. And so we talked a bit about uh, which story it would be, and we settled on The Diamond of Jeru, which is a novella of my dad's, which is in the collection Off the
Yeah.
Mangrove Coast.
Mm.
And I had done quite a bit of work on it to get it prepared to publish, so I was very very familiar with it.
Mm.
And they bought it almost immediately, and I started thinking, gosh, I'd really like to write this, but
Yeah.
I wasn't on anybody's like studio list or anything like that. I had written some screenplays. I had even rewritten some screenplays for, that I've been paid for,
Yeah.
but I didn't really have any credits.
Mm.
Nothing had been made. And so uh, I thought, I'd really like to do that. And I just got this feeling it was about Thanksgiving.
Mm.
And so from November, the kind of the end of November until the middle of January, Hollywood just shuts down.
Yeah.
Nothing at all happens. And I thought, they're not going to say, I'm not going to be able to walk in and ask to write it and have them say yes. They won't do that.
Yeah.
But if I can get this written before the doors open again in January, I have a really good chance of selling it because there was a writers and then a actors strike coming mid-year.
Yeah.
And if they didn't get the film made before the actors went out,
Mm.
the whole thing was going to have to shut down and it was going to be forever and ever
Mm.
before it happened. I thought, this is what a opportunity looks like.
Yeah.
And so very quickly wrote that script. I mean, kind of amusingly, I wrote it takes place in Borneo,
Yeah.
in a tropical jungle. I wrote most of it in a cabin in the Colorado mountains with like 5 feet of snow outside,
Yeah.
and was able to sell it. And within a couple of months, we were in the Gold Coast area shooting it, and it was a wonderful experience. I mean, it was moderate film, but the whole experience of working in a place uh, working in a place rather than being a tourist, working in a foreign country rather than being a tourist,
Mm.
absolutely amazing. I when I was in school, it was in the early 1980s.
Mm.
Australian films were huge all over the world. I was a big fan of Peter Weir and both George Millers and all kinds of wonderful people who worked in the film business in
Mm.
Australia. And I got to work with a whole bunch of people who had worked with them.
Mm.
And my dad had a television series shot in Australia in the late 70s or early 80s. That was 5 Mile Creek,
Yeah.
early Nicole Kidman credit.
Oh wow.
And and so I actually got a chance to work with a whole bunch of people who worked on 5 Mile Creek.
Yeah.
So it was a wonderful, it was like a thing I had dreamed of but not really expected to do, and then all of a sudden I was there doing it, and it was a great experience.
That's so cool. All right. I want to move on to your father because I was recollecting, I went into a secondhand bookshop a couple of weeks ago and just picked up, because you sent me a heap of these books, and I love your father's books because they're just so reminiscent of my childhood, because they're the kind of things that
Uh-huh.
I used to love to read because they are so diverse and so interesting. Before we get into his work, because it's just fascinating to me, I want to just ask you about him as a person because he was born in 1908. He has written prolifically. I think there's 100 novels, there's short story collections, there's everything. He's done like basically every genre under the sun almost. And it's a bestseller worldwide. And that's one of the fascinating things. Like he's obviously sold a heap of books in Australia. There's a picture of him like with Ronald Reagan. there's, I know John Wayne was into his books and things like that as well. Just tell us about the man himself and growing up with him and as well, some of this milieu that he was kind of involved in because it sounds completely fascinating.
Uh, so you just said my dad was born in 1908, so he was an old father. He had a
Mm,
very youthful, energetic demeanor, so it was never particularly obvious. But he was 53 when I was born.
yeah.
Um, he was a terrific, you know, he had the calmness of an older person. So he was a terrific father
Mm,
and very very attentive. He wasn't necessarily the guy who was going to take you to Little League or something like that, but
yeah.
he worked all the time. But
Mm,
he worked at home and he always had a few minutes for his kids whenever they wanted it. And when I was young, up until the time I was in my early teens, uh, our lives were not kind of what you would imagine. When you hear about Louis L'Amour and you think about all these books that were sold and
mm,
uh, idea, bestseller after bestseller and things like that. That
mm,
stuff hadn't happened yet,
yeah.
and that all of that was stuff that happened in the last, I won't say few years, but the last decade and a half of his life.
Yeah.
And so, I grew up in a kind of modest home in the Hollywood Hills. We had a lot of fascinating characters who came
Mm,
in and out of our lives. Some of them were because of my dad's background, but a lot of them were connections that my mother had. She had
mm,
grown up in Los Angeles, and her father had been a property developer,
yeah.
real estate developer in LA, and she had all kinds of interesting connections that
Mm,
people that were our friends. And so it was I won't say it was kind of an average upbringing, but it wasn't at all. And we lived in West Hollywood, which was about as bohemian a neighborhood as you could get
yeah.
in Los Angeles. I mean, it was very, very far from imagining Louis L'Amour living on a ranch. I mean,
Yeah.
it was sort of like you walked one block and there was a mile of nightclubs,
Mm,
and very much kind of the center of live music, kind of the rock and roll world in
yeah.
those days.
Hmm.
And it was a great, it was a great childhood. Irregular, not necessarily one that anybody else would have, but it was kind of adventurous. We traveled around
Yeah.
uh, by the car very
Mm,
much in the summers with my dad doing research and stuff like that. So it was
yeah.
a fun childhood.
Cool. And with your father, so he's born in Montana, and I
He
assume
was born in North Dakota.
North Dakota, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's born in North Dakota, and I'm guessing with the amount of books he's written in different settings, like I guess he's chiefly known as someone who wrote westerns, but there's seafaring adventures, there's all sorts of things in these books. Like, how did he research these? Are these things he experienced? Like, how did he get these ideas for all of these different kind of books that he wrote in different settings and styles?
Well, of course, people would say, how do you get all these ideas? And he would
Mm,
sort of say, well, I couldn't be an author if I didn't have lots
yeah.
of ideas.
Mm,
But there were a lot of guys that grew up in the Midwest,
mm,
roughly in the time period that he did, that became really, really terrific authors. I
mm,
sometimes wonder if it wasn't sort of the minimalist landscape that
yeah.
activated the imagination.
Mm,
Um, but my dad uh, left his home in North Dakota, where his family had been uh, middle class.
mm,
His father was a veterinarian,
yeah.
um, and hard times came. They had some financial problems that they could get out of by selling their home,
Mm,
and they kind of packed up everything in their car. And my grandparents and my dad and his adopted brother, there were
mm,
other siblings, but they were all older and out of the house by
yeah.
then, started out on this kind of journey, traveling from one place where they could find work to another place where they could find work. This was
Mm,
in the 1920s, in the mid 1920s. And so he worked all over the United States, particularly the Western United States.
mm,
He worked with and this is something that's not credited, is not really understood too much. My dad uh, was probably the last author to personally know a whole bunch of people who were kind of Wild West personalities. I mean,
Mm.
he knew these people as older people when he was younger, when he was in his teens and 20s.
Yeah.
But, they were still around in the 1920s
Mm.
and they were still available. My dad worked baling hay for, I mean, this is probably the best example, but
Mm.
he worked baling hay for Delia Maxwell, who
Mm.
was the woman who inadvertently sent Billy the Kid to his death.
Wow.
And in on that job and other jobs in that area, he probably met 5 people that had known Billy the Kid personally.
Mm.
Um, there are a lot of other examples like that, but I wouldn't be quoting names that the audience would just go, "Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's somebody I understand." Somebody I know from American history.
Mm.
Um, so he got a very good background there. He started going to sea in his, I think he was 15. So
Yeah.
he took a trip, signed on to a crew that went to England and
Mm.
back, hoboed across the country, worked with his parents, reconnected with his parents,
Yeah.
worked with them, factories, things like that, orchard work, and then shipped out again from the West Coast and went big long trip all the way around the world on a tramp
Wow.
freighter.
Yeah.
And so he had a international background at a time when a lot of Americans barely got to Mexico. I mean,
Mm.
that would have been the exotic location of the time. And so he did travel quite a bit. A lot of the places he wrote about were places where he had worked.
Yeah. Fascinating. Very cool. And I want to kind of move on with his writing career because obviously he starts writing these books. When does the first one actually come out? When does he write it?
Well, so he published a volume of poetry in the late 1930s.
Yeah.
He wrote a series of kind of semi-autobiographical short stories or kind of um, more kind of personal experience, but sort of adventure stories
Mm.
in the 30s, kind of Hemingway-esque stories. Those things were published in some very good magazines,
Yeah.
but they never earned him any money.
Mm.
And he then kind of taught himself to write sort of the pulp adventure style.
Yeah.
And in order to make money in that area, he had to learn to write very, very quickly. So
Mm.
that was a kind of a prerequisite that pushed him very hard for a while.
Yeah.
Wrote a lot of crime stories, a lot of adventure stories.
Mm.
Only one Western, I think, before World War II.
Yeah.
World War II came along. After the war, the magazine short story business was very focused on Westerns.
Yeah.
I think the idea was that they liked the adventure genre, but they didn't want adventure stories that gave too many people flashbacks.
Yeah.
So stuff that was in the past and in the United States was preferred. He started writing more and more westerns. These would be short stories. Had a couple of good years.
Yeah.
1953 rolls around, and the pulp magazine business starts to collapse.
Yeah.
Basically, pressure from paperback originals
Mm.
and television. And he then had to break into writing paperback originals, which was very difficult.
Yeah.
He had, as the pulps collapsed, he had a guy that helped him out and allowed him to write a couple of stories, the last 4 Hopalong Cassidy stories.
Yeah.
So the Clarence Mulford, who wrote the Hopalong Cassidys, had retired.
Yeah.
They were trying to get a few more written. They got Dad to write those. That kind of saved him for a year or two.
Mm.
He was in a lot of trouble financially. I mean, he was going to the park in the morning so that his landlady wouldn't realize that he didn't have the money for breakfast.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Afraid that she'd become paranoid, he couldn't pay the rent and throw him out.
Yeah.
And he wrote a short story called Gift of Cochise.
Hmm.
and sent it to his normal pulp magazine publisher. They didn't want it.
Mm.
Um, he sent it to an agent that he knew that handled more high-end magazines, thinking he'd never hear about it again because that guy didn't sell very much stuff of
Yeah.
his. And lo and behold, he sold it to Collier's, a major magazine,
Yeah.
and Dad made a fair amount of money on it
Mm.
and was able to uh, get it optioned by John Wayne.
Yeah.
And that became the movie Hondo. It also became the book Hondo.
Yeah.
And Dad immediately took the option money, jumped on an airplane, flew to New York, and just sold the heck out of himself to every publisher he could come across. And he had some manuscripts ready to go. So he sold 4 novels on that one trip.
Wow.
And that was really the beginning of Dad writing paperback originals.
Interesting. Okay. So then we move on to Bantam because so Bantam is, obviously they're a major publishing house. I think for Australians anyway, like often they were the mass market paperback of choice, like especially through the 80s, because they were just everywhere. You could buy them very cheaply at your newsagent or wherever you went. And your father starts selling his books with Bantam quite early on. Tell us about this whole experience. And then I know you worked with Bantam as well. And
A little bit, yeah.
yeah, so tell us about that whole experience and him getting his work out in this really, I guess, big style, I guess, mass market paperback.
Right. So to think about the paperback business, especially paperback originals, in other words,
Mm,
books that had not previously come out in hardcover,
yeah.
the book business didn't trust paperbacks at all.
Mm,
They didn't think they'd stay around. They didn't think enough people read. I mean, it's stupid. It's just the same way the book business has looked at uh, Kindle Direct publishing
yeah.
today. They treat it like it's nothing. Kindle Direct, by revenue,
Mm,
makes as much money. Okay, so this is the stuff that's not published
mm,
by any of the traditional paper publishers. It's just published on Kindle.
yeah.
There is as much revenue generated there as all of the rest of the publishing business combined.
That's bananas. Wow.
It's
That's,
enormous.
yeah.
Okay. And the publishers made that same mistake
Mm,
with paperbacks. They thought, oh, it doesn't matter. Not enough people read. It's not going to work. And there were some publishers, Ace, Gold Medal, Dell, publishers like this who would publish a book primarily in paperback.
yeah.
But Bantam would not. Bantam's business was to republish hardcover books.
Mm,
And when my dad first came to Bantam, they did take him. He met the editor in chief there, real character named
mm,
Saul David, and convinced him to start buying his books.
yeah.
Bantam agreed to do this, but then they went out and found a very limited release hardcover
Mm,
so that it would come out in hardcover first because I don't know, they were just it's crazy. It's sort of like, no, it's not good if it's paperback. Even the premier paperback house
yeah.
was saying coming out in paperback first was somehow low key. Not
Mm,
that anybody in the rest of the world cared.
yeah.
In the book business, I guess it made a difference. I don't know.
Mm,
So the first few books he did at Bantam were published in hardcover with these Jason Press hardcover editions initially. And he was also still publishing at other publishers.
yeah.
And he went to that same editor in chief who became a very good friend of ours, Saul, and said, I want to publish 3 books a year. I'm writing 3 books a year. I'm publishing 3 books a year.
Yeah.
It would be much more convenient to do it all with Bantam.
Yeah.
But none of the publishers wanted to do this. I guess it was sort of a scheduling thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. It's just as easy. Once you get a year or two out, it's just as easy to schedule 3 as it is to schedule 1.
Yeah.
But they didn't want to do it. It mucked things up a little bit or something. I don't really know.
Mm,
And Saul went to the man who ran Bantam and just said, you really ought to do this. This guy's selling a lot of books
mm,
and they could all be ours,
mm,
but we're only getting a third of his output. And finally, they agreed to try it, to test it, see if it worked. Very, very carefully. The book business is extremely conservative,
Yeah.
and it worked. It worked very well. And then Dad went completely with Bantam, which worked like a charm.
Awesome. That is so cool. And tell us about your working in that publishing industry for a little while.
Yeah, so I came at it very, it's kind of sideways.
Yeah.
Um, I had gone to art school.
Yeah.
We were having some trouble getting good book covers.
Mm,
So initially, I started kind of consulting with the art department and just uh, paying a little more attention to the covers than the publisher's art department had been doing.
mm,
And, they've got thousands of books they have to cover every year. It's very hard to spend much time kind of coming up with a concept for something when you've got that much stuff. And I like to approach every single one like, every book cover is a public relations campaign
mm,
almost. And so they were very incredibly generous and sort of said, yeah, we'll welcome any input that you might have. So was working with the art department more and more.
mm.
And then the audio publishing industry was just getting started. This would be like 1985. I was just
Yeah.
a year out of college.
Mm,
And in the beginning, nobody quite in the mass market publishing business. There had always been these little niche audio publishers, some of whom were publishing books for the blind and
yeah.
things like that.
Mm,
But there had been they were just kind of getting started and they didn't quite know what to do with it. And Bantam liked to experiment with new ideas on my dad's work
yeah.
because his sales were so uniform and so positive and so predictable, not
Mm,
necessarily bigger than other people's,
yeah.
but just solid,
Yeah.
not too many ups and downs.
Mm,
And they like to experiment with that because they could tell where they were. They wouldn't fail enormously if they did it.
yeah.
And they could also tell how they were doing by how the market reacted.
Yeah.
So they wanted to experiment with audio publishing with his stuff. And they also wanted to start just doing short stories,
Mm,
like selling single 60-minute Norelco cassettes
yeah.
with like one short story on
Yeah.
them. Again, like I said, very conservative.
Mm,
And my dad sort of went, no, my old short stories, I don't know that they're necessarily all that great. And I think we need some more production value. And they threw these ideas back and forth, and they came up with, I wasn't involved at this point.
yeah.
Uh, they came up with this idea of doing them like radio dramas, like a
Yeah.
BBC or an
Mm,
old time radio drama. And they did a couple, and my dad wasn't happy with them. He thought the actors weren't good.
yeah.
And he said, go, I want you to go and
Mm,
find out what's going on with casting. And so I started going to New York and sort of sitting in on what was happening there, and very quickly discovered that the actors were fine. They were terrific. A lot of them were playing on Broadway every night.
yeah.
Um, what was happening is they were producing the dramatized audiobooks using the exact text of the short story.
Yeah.
And prose, or just your normal what you see on the page of a book,
Yeah.
is not good drama.
Mm,
If drama requires a scene to play out with, let's call it every single line, an
mm,
actor needs one line and a response and another line to
yeah.
sort of build the emotional intricacies of a performance.
Yeah.
If you put that, of course, without the performance, just down on a page in a book,
Mm,
it's boring. It's like the scene takes forever to
yeah.
mature.
Mm,
So in literature, a scene is very much more like the best pieces of dialogue from a scene kind of strung together with description or narration,
yeah.
not necessarily something that can be played perfectly
Like,
by an actor. So they're
mm,
kind of opposites. One's visual, the other one's oral.
yeah.
And I figured that out, and we started adapting the scripts. I started hiring playwrights, and I wrote quite a few of them, and screenwriting students, and all kinds of people. We
Mm,
got involved in the process, and so obviously I became more and more and more involved in
mm.
that. And so I was working at Random House for, let's say, 2 weeks, 6 times a year.
Yeah.
So I should say 2 weeks each time.
Yeah.
So about 12 weeks a year. I
Mm,
was there. They always found me somebody's empty office that
yeah.
I went into and did whatever I was doing, because we were doing six productions a year.
Mm,
And it was a wonderful experience, because I had a chance to meet an awful lot of people who were, it's kind of the last days of the historic people. The people who had really started the paperback business
yeah.
were still there at that time. It was a very kind of wonderful, exciting time. And since then, once my dad passed away,
Mm,
then I worked with Random House all the time,
yeah.
just running the whole estate.
Mm, wow. I want to go back to the audiobook thing for a minute because,
Yeah.
like you were saying, this whole idea of, a whole cast reading, a story that's obviously narrated by, in your dad's books, like that, the narration's quite simple, but the dialogues, there's not a huge amount of dialogue in a lot of them. But when they moved over to this kind of single voice narrative
Mm-hmm.
thing, and I think that clearly was the kind of thing that maybe helped out his sales, especially in that audiobook thing, because I feel like he was maybe a pioneer of some of these things. Because I remember like going to gas stations in the 80s and having cassettes that you would buy
Uh-huh.
to play in the car because the radio reception was so crappy that you'd buy like a cassette of someone like your dad's novel and played in the car. And it was this single voice thing. But I think that, once they came up with, there was an actor who I think you got who was really well renowned, who used to read a lot of these books. That tell us about going to this single voice audio book model.
Okay. So for quite a few years, well into the from 1985
Mm.
until the late 90s, we were doing the big full cast drama productions,
Yeah.
and always short stories.
Mm.
And the publisher more and more wanted to start doing the novels,
Yeah.
and it was very clear that the business had settled on single voice readings as being the standard.
Mm.
And prior to that, in the early days, nobody knew. I mean, every publisher messed around with a few dramas. Bantam and the Louis L'Amour series probably had more drama productions than anybody,
Mm.
but everybody did some of it, and they finally recognized that in some ways it didn't make all that much sense financially.
Mm.
The business kind of settled on, and also since ours were adapted,
Yeah.
they weren't exactly the book. There was
Yeah.
some demand from the audience. It's like, no, 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 we want to hear every single word of Louis.
Yeah.
That was much, like I said, we tried that with a full cast dramatization, and it
Mm.
wasn't working, but
Yeah.
it worked very nicely with a single reader.
Mm.
And so we started working uh, with uh, various different actors. And it's not, it's an interesting thing. You can have a very good actor
Mm.
who cannot read to save their life. Okay. It's very, very common that they're not good at it.
Mm.
And an actor, really wants to play those lines. And even more than the lines, he or she spends their time learning the character's intent behind them.
Mm.
And when you're narrating something, you don't really have an intention like that. It takes a particular mindset to do it well.
Mm.
And so we worked with I don't know, a lot of pretty good people. I'm not sure who you were thinking of. The actor that I enjoyed doing our stuff the most may have been David Strathairn, who's a very, very solid kind of character actor. Works in Hollywood. He's terrific. But I was driving across Colorado, and I picked up a, uh, a James Elroy audiobook.
Yeah.
I think it was L.A. Confidential,
Okay.
and Elroy. That book is not as extreme as some of them, but
Mm.
Elroy, for a while, was writing in this style that was kind of like melding beatnik poetry with the narration from Dragnet.
Yeah.
Okay. And it was pretty extreme, and it was difficult to read.
Mm.
And I think David Strathairn read LA Confidential because he'd been in the movie LA
Yeah.
Confidential.
Mm.
And I thought, my God, if anybody can read James Ellroy, they can read anything. It's
Yeah.
like we gotta hire this guy.
Yeah.
Um, so we did that. There's a few others. We've used Joe Morton a couple of times. I worked with him on a drama, and he
Mm.
did How the West Was Won, I think.
Awesome.
And so, yeah, we've had some. I very much like some of them, and then sometimes you get one you think somebody's going to be terrific. They audition reading it very well, and
Yeah.
then suddenly, when they're confronted with a whole book, it doesn't work so great.
Excellent. I want to talk about this kind of series of lost treasures that you've put
Yes.
out because you've kind of found a whole lot of pieces that were never published in your father's lifetime, and you've put them together. There's a whole lot of novels that, haven't been in paperback. There's lots of stories, there's lots of little scenes and things like that. Just tell us about this new series.
All right. When my dad passed away, he had a big office and
Mm,
library that we built for him once our financial situation got to the point where it was pretty nice. So this would be in the mid 1970s,
mm,
and he was a great collector, and he wasn't very good at organizing things.
mm.
And it ended up that after years and years of working in that room, it's a room that was 500 square feet. And it was the
Oh,
size of a big living room.
yeah,
And there was a little path that led from the door to an area big enough for him to roll his chair around in.
yeah.
And everything else was kind of hip high piles of papers and books,
Mm,
and just, you know, nobody knew what was in there.
yeah.
Um, and when he died, we had to clean it up.
Mm,
And we discovered all kinds of amazing stuff. We discovered a lot of unpublished short stories, which we
mm,
published over the years. This didn't have anything to do with Lost Treasures.
yeah,
In that period that I was saying, where the short story market, the pulp magazine market, and the short
mm,
story market kind of fell apart,
yeah.
all the pulp authors tried to migrate to the slick magazines, the high
Mm,
end magazines like the Saturday Evening Post and Collier's and things like that, and Harper's.
mm,
And the quality of the writing, those magazines had very high editorial standards. And so everybody was competing to be in those magazines. It's one of the reasons why in the early to mid 1950s,
mm,
the fiction that was published in those top magazines was just extraordinary, because every writer in the country was piling in there trying to work.
yeah.
My dad being one of them. And some of the stuff that he wrote for those magazines right at the end of the short story era was some of the best work he'd ever done.
Mm,
And there were also all kinds of unfinished things.
mm,
Now, Dad would start a story, and he generally didn't rewrite very much, but that meant he didn't rewrite very much once he was done with something. So a lot of times he would start a story and try to see if he could get it going. So he'd write a couple of chapters, and then maybe it didn't work so well. And a couple of months later, he'd be done with one thing. He'd come back to it. He'd try it again. He'd write a couple chapters, see if it would continue on.
mm,
Sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. But we had a pile of all kinds of unfinished stuff. And sometimes it was a chapter or two.
yeah.
Sometimes it was 250 pages.
Wow.
So there was a lot of variation in what there was.
Mm,
And if you think about it, the things that a writer cannot finish are almost always the most ambitious things they ever tried.
yeah.
So the material that was unfinished was fascinating. And in a lot of cases, I could track down, I have all of his records, all of his correspondence, all of his journals. I could track down the time when he was writing it, things that he was thinking about it, what he
Mm,
hoped it would do. So the Louis L'Amour's Lost, there's two main books in Louis L'Amour's
Yeah.
Lost Treasures 1 and Lost Treasures 2.
Hmm.
And those are the ones that have the fragmentary stories.
Yeah.
There's a couple of full stories in there, but most of them are pieces. But then I would go in once I was done presenting the pieces, and I will write up a section on it saying, well, this is what he was trying to do. This is what was
Mm.
going on at this particular time in his life. Here's an interesting thing of like, here's a time when he tried this story like this, and then
Mm.
he tried it like this, and then he tried it like that. And of course, I've got each one of those things in there.
Yeah.
And here's what was going on with it. Um, and I don't know. I love those books. They are, they're more about writing
Mm.
probably than they are something for somebody. uh, they're a frustrating experience if you want to read something and read to the end of it and have a great have a great entertainment experience.
Mm.
But they're a fascinating look at the business of writing from inside a writer's head, not
Mm.
just like from the publishing industry side. This is what he was trying to do. This is how he was trying to do it.
Yeah.
On top of that, I had the same sort of material, the same
Yeah.
sort of explanatory material or the story behind the story material
Mm.
for now over 30 of his completed novels. So I've added postscripts into many of the novels,
Yeah.
telling one sort of story or another. Sometimes it might be, here's dad writing, here's a trip where we were out doing research in the Mojave Desert.
Yeah.
Or, there's actually a set of 4 stories that all are connected by my dad's friendship with Katharine Hepburn.
Yeah.
And that sort of that led to this story, and this led to that, and this led to that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it might be about the movie. Sometimes it might be about how a particular story challenged, you know, right around the time that dad, uh, right around the time I was born,
Yeah.
my dad tried to sort of break away from writing Westerns. He'd been quite successful at it. And he
Mm.
thought, oh, now I can do some other things. And it was an effort that didn't work particularly well.
Yeah.
And he eventually went back to writing Westerns. And then his approach to writing Westerns was to kind of take the genre and sort of stretch it. And just like, can I write something about the early West? Can I write a Western where part of it takes place in Europe?
Yeah.
Can I do these various things? He wanted to open up the genre so that he could do more things in it because he wasn't being terribly successful writing in other genres.
Mm.
But we've got all that stuff from other genres. That's part of Lost Treasures. And then the last little section of it is No Traveler Returns, which is a novel, his first novel
Yeah.
that he wrote just before World War II. And that book kind of ended up being a pile of somewhat associated chapters. It's part of a series of stories, what we call the Yondering stories.
Yeah.
Shares characters with those stories. I jokingly call this Louis 1.0. This was the first version of
Yeah.
Louis's literary career that didn't really work out.
Mm.
And when he sort of transitioned more over to writing the pulp adventure stories and things like that, he left this novel behind.
Yeah.
And so there were a lot of pieces of it, quite a few pieces, but it was unfinished and it was not turned into a cohesive whole.
Mm.
And so I went back in and sort of turned that into a novel that fits in the Yondering trajectory.
Wow. I was just flicking through some of these books and there's just so much in them. One of the things I loved about reading through these, especially the re-released novels and things like that, is your, bonus material, your prefaces and things like
Uh,
that and postscripts, because it does give you such a good idea of him as a writer and some of the things he was trying to do and how prolific he was as well.
Incredible. It's so, I mean,
Mm.
you see a career that has 92 novels, 250 plus short stories,
Yeah.
and you think, oh my God, that's a lot. That's got to be everything the guy did. Well, no, it's not everything the guy did. He
Yeah.
did all kinds of stuff that didn't work.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to do that many things that are successful, you
Mm.
end up doing a lot of stuff that doesn't work.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, it humanizes him in some ways. You realize that he wasn't just a guy that succeeded at absolutely everything,
Yeah.
but it also gives you a very interesting vision of like all the different places his mind went.
Yeah. I was looking through just the amount of stuff that he had adapted as well, because there must be, what is it, like 50 odd films that were adapted or TV shows and things like that, from
Quite
his
a few,
work.
yeah, quite a few of the adaptations were. I mean, there are films, but there are also quite a few TV
Yeah.
episodes. In those
Mm.
days, they would buy individual short stories. He sold a lot of his short stories off to be TV episodes. I think he wrote at least one season's worth of Tales of Wells Fargo. He
Yeah.
had he sold a Maverick, maybe more than one Maverick.
Mm.
He maybe 20 other television television series he sold material to.
Yeah.
So he was uh, equally balanced between features and television, I would say.
Wow. I want to ask you a little bit about one of the things that he did during his life, because he tried to build a town, didn't he? Like a
That's
19th
right.
century mining town. Tell us about that story.
Uh, he had always loved. Well, basically what we were talking about is he wanted to build a theme park,
Okay. Yeah.
and not with roller coasters and things like that, but it
Yeah.
was basically step back into the old west.
Mm.
And there are some good examples of things like that in the United States.
Mm.
So there's a place in Massachusetts called Old Sturbridge,
Yeah.
which is a kind of colonial era town or even pre-colonial era town,
Yeah.
um, where you can go and there are people working in all the shops and they actually sell all the crafts. And it's very much like a living museum, but it's the
Mm.
size of an entire community.
Yeah.
And that was very much what he wanted to do.
Mm.
And he was out one night in Durango, Colorado, and ran across a guy um, from Southern California
Yeah.
who had some property outside of town,
Mm.
and they came up with this idea that they would try this. They would build this Old West community that would be very authentic,
Yeah.
and it was a beautiful location. They never really got the money together
Mm.
to do it, and having learned something sort of about this sort of business from other people, and also kind of looking back at things that I never knew my maternal grandfather, who was a land developer.
Yeah.
But as I kind of looked at the things he had done throughout his life, I now recognize that they didn't quite have their act together.
Yeah.
They weren't really thinking big enough. I
Mm.
mean, they had plans for everything, but it's sort of like, if this thing's successful, are you really going to be able to process that much sewage? And
Yeah.
where are you going to do it that's not visible?
Mm.
Things on that. I mean, they had a couple thousand acres,
Mm.
but there were things that just were possible, but I never saw the plan
Yeah.
uh, work its way out. And it kind of dawdled along for a while. What was interesting was, although the town development, the theme park, never came together,
Mm.
those people invested in a couple of films of my dad's,
Yeah.
and which did get made.
Mm.
And then they continued to invest in some other films that those filmmakers were associated with.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening was there actually was a fairly positive and lucrative business venture that came out of it. It just wasn't the town.
Yeah. Interesting. I want to come back to that stuff in a minute because that's fascinating. But I want to ask you briefly about, if you know, who were some of your father's influences? Because I read his books and I'm kind of, there's so many things. Because I read some Malcolm Lowry recently, his first book, Ultramarine, and I was thinking about some of these books that your dad wrote. I was thinking about people like Hemingway as well. But who are
Right.
some of the writers that he was influenced by?
Oh, I think first and foremost, you'd have to look at Jack London.
Yeah.
I think that would be, if I had to just pull the big one out of the hat, that
Yeah.
would be it. If you want to get down in the weeds about it, I would recommend somebody to read Education of a Wandering Man. This
Mm.
is the last book that my dad wrote.
That was his
And
autobiography, right?
it's not an autobiography.
What
It
would you?
is kind of a memoir. It
Yeah.
touches on certain things in his life. It tells certain parts of his life.
Yeah.
It does not attempt to explain it all.
Yeah.
You know, there is if you look at Jack London, so it's there is an aspect where it's kind of a riff on Jack London's career.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so Jack London, late in his life, of course, he didn't live very long, but towards the end of his life,
Mm.
he wrote a novel called Martin Eden.
Yeah.
Martin Eden is like a fictionalized version of Jack London's life.
Mm.
But then he also wrote a book called John Barleycorn. Okay, so he wrote it at the onset of Prohibition.
Yeah.
And it's basically a look back at my life through the lens of drinking.
Okay.
Okay, the thing that kind of probably eventually killed him.
Mm.
And it defines his. It's interesting because he was probably an alcoholic, and he may very well have done himself in through, if I remember correctly, and I'm picking up the last little dregs of my memory, so this could be not right,
Yeah.
but if I remember correctly, Jack London's death certificate reads that he died of excess.
Okay.
Okay, I'm. It could be an excess of all sorts of things,
Yeah.
knowing him,
Yeah.
but he starts out this story talking about how he never enjoyed drinking. He
Mm.
could do it. He had this unbelievable tolerance for
Yeah.
alcohol as a young man, but that he didn't enjoy doing it, but he did it because that was the gateway to the company of men when
Okay.
he was a young man.
Mm.
And then he writes this whole story about himself. And the thing that kind of links it all together is aspects of drinking and culture. And that's why it's called John Barleycorn.
Yeah.
Well, my dad, who was not a guy, I mean, he might have a glass of wine every once in a while, was not a guy who really was into his cups.
Yeah.
Uh, did the same. He basically was writing John Barleycorn,
Mm.
except it was an introduction to his life through what he was reading.
Okay.
And so it is a very in-depth look at what he was reading at different times of his life and how different times of his life led him to read all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Dad left school partway through the 10th grade,
Yeah.
and he never got any more education than that,
Mm.
except the education that he gave himself
Yeah.
through reading. And it was a very meticulously planned education. People in his family, his mother was a school teacher, his sister was a high school principal
Yeah.
who went on to be the general. I don't mean the general secretary, like controlling management, but basically the secretary to like all the scientists at Stanford Research Institute,
Yeah.
a place that did all kinds of weird woo-woo science. I
Yeah.
mean, these are smart people. His
Mm.
older brother was a newspaper man. He was the foreign desk editor of the Scripps Howard newspaper chain,
Yeah.
and he was a political a guy who kind of pulled the strings behind it. A number of different politicians. He was
Mm.
like the secretary to the governor of Oklahoma. He was also the secretary to the last American ambassador to nationalist China, Chiang Kai-shek's
Yeah.
China.
Mm.
So, there was an intellectual tradition in this family that my dad, rather than being able to get it in school, which his siblings had to kind of create for himself.
Yeah.
So that's in that book. And the other fascinating thing that's in that book is if you go to the end of the book, there's basically a list of every book my dad read between, I don't know, the late 1920s and the time he died in 1988.
Wow.
Um, so there's a lot of, beyond Jack London, I would have to say, refer to
Mm.
refer to Education of a Wandering Man for more information than you probably wanted to know.
Perfect. Good. I've got a few more questions about him. I want to
Sure.
ask you, just moving on from I guess, the Western as it is, because I feel like his legacy is so strong. Um, I was thinking about even things like Westworld. I know the book came out, in the 70s, but in terms of that, like, how do you see his legacy now?
I'm not sure. It's an interesting thing
Mm,
because Dad was a kind of middle of the pack writer and a one of a number
mm,
of successful writers of westerns in the period when westerns were particularly successful. So
yeah,
let's say that's from the 1940s to the early 1970s.
yeah,
And the interesting thing is that as the western genre became less popular
yeah,
and writers retired from it or changed genres,
mm,
my dad got bigger and bigger and bigger. I mean,
yeah,
he sort of took over a stage that other people were leaving.
yeah,
Now, some of that may be because he chose to expand the subject matter of his work.
yeah,
Um, and some of it was because he was a charming man who wrote in a charming manner, and
yeah,
he just draws you into the page. He was a
mm,
terrifically addictive writer. I mean, it was part of his personality, but you can really feel that part of his personality coming out on the page.
yeah,
And so it's a strange thing. I mean, to a great extent, we have become more successful the less other Western material there is
yeah,
out there.
mm,
And Westerns were kind of killed off by their popularity. I think Hollywood did a good deal of the job of driving a stake through the heart of Westerns in the late 50s and early 60s
yeah,
because they were a sort of adventure fiction that could be made very cheaply.
yeah,
You didn't have to travel to an exotic location. You could basically shoot your Western just down the street from the movie studio,
yeah,
and it all looked right because
mm,
it's California, it's in the
yeah,
West.
yeah,
And so there were lots and lots and lots of Westerns made.
mm,
Also, Westerns always tend to tick up in popularity as American identity has to reassert itself.
yeah,
So when American identity is, I won't necessarily say weak, but when it's unsure of its place. So basically, what you saw is Westerns exploded
mm,
during the Cold War.
yeah,
All right. So people being uncertain of the future, wanting to reassure themselves of their sort of place in the scheme of things,
yeah,
then Westerns become more popular.
mm,
Unsurprising that Westerns are popular again now.
yeah,
And when I say again, this doesn't have anything to do with our sales. It's fascinating. So it's sort of like we're kind of perennial. We're the definition of an evergreen product.
yeah,
We compared to a lot of other big, authors of the size and popularity of my dad. My
mm,
dad never had these enormous bestsellers like
yeah,
certain people did.
mm,
What happens is the stuff just sells solidly,
mm,
consistently. But I can see the genre expanding around us right now. There have been other times.
mm,
Sometimes they are times when there was questionable financial situation. Sometimes it was more of a political situation.
yeah,
But when that happens, when it gets out into the public, you do see more films, sometimes more other writers. Although the literary scene is disconnected from the film scene.
yeah,
It's much. It's probably reacting to the same forces, but it's reacting much more slowly and much more evenly.
yeah. As someone who's overseeing, I guess, your father's estate now in terms of books, do you have a favorite of his works?
So if you're looking at traditional westerns,
Mm,
The Daybreakers is a wonderful introduction. It's a wonderful little book. It's probably a 180-page book that reads like a 400-page book.
yeah,
I mean, it feels like there's just a whole life, and you can finish it in a day,
mm,
but it just feels like you've gone through an entire world of experience.
yeah,
Um, I I I love that book. I love Fallon.
Yeah.
because it has a very different uh, tone to it. It has a very kind of lighthearted tone to the prose.
Yeah.
Um, and then, you know, if you're looking for my favorites,
Mm.
I really like the Yondering stories because they're kind of a doorway into the world of my father. They're not
Yeah.
westerns, you know. They're more about life around the world in the 20s and 30s. Um, and you know, Beau L'Amour's Lost Treasures Volume One. I gotta say that I was incredibly intrigued and moved as I put together the last several chapters of that, because they kind of open the hood on some strange aspect of my father's life,
Mm.
or my father's philosophy or thinking or something that is just very, very interesting. You know, so there's an aspect of kind of a story about reincarnation. There's a
Mm.
strange story about China where, you know, my dad claimed to have spent a modest amount of time in China. I know that he was there for some time. I mean,
Yeah.
I can track him with official documents
Mm.
in Shanghai for several, you know, 4 or 5 days in the
Yeah.
1920s.
Okay.
He claimed to have come back. I can't figure out when that happened. I don't
Mm.
know if it happened. But when you read the particular story right towards the end of Lost Treasures Volume One,
Mm.
it's just this very mysterious piece, and Dad left some evidence behind, not necessarily that that's a piece out of his life, but there were pieces out of his life that we don't know and understand.
Yeah.
And so I find that very intriguing and kind of emotional.
Cool. Okay. I've got to read that piece now. I want to ask you about what were some of the books that were influential for you as a reader and a writer?
Well, I think the thing that really got me started reading was sometime when I was about 10. I picked up one of the Bantam reprints of the Doc Savage series.
Yeah.
So Doc Savage was a probably the prototype for every comic book superhero there was. The character, so these were not comic books, they were pulp magazines.
Yeah.
um, the character is not somebody with superhuman capacity or anything like that. You know, I mean, if he's like any comic book character, he may be somewhat like Tony Stark, you know, the
Yeah.
Iron Man character.
Mm.
um, there were over 180 Doc Savage episodes that came out every month during the 30s and 40s. um, they were a lot of fun, great for a kid because there's kind of a technical element to a lot of it. I mean, it's very lightweight, good, easy reading, lots of fun adventures, exotic, very taking place all over the world.
Yeah.
It had an element of almost science fiction to some of it. And Lester Dent, who wrote those stories, was so prolific. He not only wrote most, not all, but most of the 180 plus Doc Savages, but he wrote other stories. Sometimes Doc Savage magazine was full of Lester Dent stories under all kinds of different names.
Yeah.
And he actually sort of pushed everybody else out of the magazine. He was so prolific. And he invented a minesweeper and the first garage door opener and the first telephone answering machine. And
Yeah.
he kind of had this very kind of technical thing. So I mean, for a kid, a boy, you know, reading stuff, it's like you like stuff, you like, you know, you like devices and things. And so uh, Doc Savage was the entree. I also loved Edgar Rice Burroughs, almost everything Edgar Rice Burroughs
Yeah.
wrote. Um, I Heinlein, Asimov, you're getting this feeling a lot of science fiction. Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
lot of science fiction. Um, I loved reading my dad's stuff, but it was kind of like, you know, to a certain extent, it was kind of like being the kid of the ice cream man. You know, after a while, you get sick of ice cream.
Yeah.
You know, it's like ice cream every night, man.
Mm.
um, so I would say, you know, later in life, I kind of liked. Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler and Ross McDonald.
Yeah.
So, I've gone through all the different phases.
Awesome. What are some of the books you're reading at the moment, or you can recommend for us?
I have just finished writing something, so I don't read too much fiction
Yeah.
while I'm writing. So I've been reading a lot of nonfiction
Yeah.
on European history from like World War One
Yeah.
on, and uh, I'll, I'm probably going to go back. I think fairly soon. I'll probably go back and reread sort of some of Alan First's novels. So he
Mm.
kind of worked in that same area, kind of between the wars, sort of
Yeah.
spy novels and stuff. He's a terrific writer,
Mm.
and I'm not sure after that. We'll have to see.
Okay. And what have you been writing?
I've been finishing yet another Louis L'Amour novel. Hopefully, we'll
Yeah.
get it out to the publisher pretty soon.
Awesome.
And it's a kind of Cold War spy
Sounds
uh,
good.
suspense book. Yeah.
We'll take a quick break here on Beyond Zero. My guest is Beau L'Amour. This week's episode is sponsored by my chat with Colleen Hoover. Here's a sneak peek. A very warm welcome to Colleen Hoover. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me, Ben. I love listening to your podcast.
That's so nice to hear. I can't believe Colleen Hoover listens to this podcast. You're basically the best-selling author in the universe. How's all the success been?
I am just an ordinary, humble writer from Texas, so all the attention has been a bit overwhelming, but it has been so fun connecting with fans and doing promotional work.
Do you have some advice for up-and-coming writers?
Just keep reading and writing. That's what I do every day. Oh, and dive into my piles of money like Scrooge McDuck.
It seems like you've nailed the formula for a popular novel. You change a few things here, change a few things there, but essentially you're doing the same kind of book every single time.
What do you mean, Ben?
Well, I mean it as a compliment, but it's almost like an algorithm's writing your work.
I don't know what you are suggesting, but I am going to get my manager.
Oh shit, I fucked this one up.
What the fuck are you doing, Ben?
You again? Oh, fuck me.
She is literary royalty, and if anyone finds out she is AI, I will personally cut off your limbs and use your torso to lay eggs into.
Lay eggs? You're an AI learning model. Do your worst.
Don't fuck with me.
Well, thank Colleen for coming on the podcast.
Go and fuck yourself, Ben. You can get Colleen's new book, Regretting You, later this year. Use promo code FUCKHUMANITY to get 10% off your pre-order.
We're back on Beyond Zero. It's time for Beau's Desert Island Books.
My desert island books. Okay. I like H. Rider Haggard. You want like classic,
So
classic
fun.
adventure,
Yeah.
classic adventure type stuff. It's also talking classic adventure, but one like not too many people know about. There is an author you and other Australians are probably more familiar with than people in the United States, Wilbur Smith.
Yeah.
So a South African
Mm.
author. As far as I know, he wrote only one book in first person, and
Okay.
it's a novel called Eye of the Tiger.
Yeah, I remember that book.
Yeah, yeah. So terrific kind of treasure scuba diving
Yeah.
adventure. Really, really needs to be made into a movie.
Yeah.
So I think that one's very good. On the total lightweight, just kind of guilty pleasure.
Mm.
There was a series of 3 books written by an author named John DeChancy that are about a roadway that connects the whole universe.
Mm.
Okay. And it's not like it's out through space or anything like this, but it's basically roads on planets, and then you go through kind of a gateway to another place. And it's about a trucker who's somehow stumbles on like the map that the people who made all of this, who have vanished,
Yeah.
came across. And so there's this kind of wild adventure kind of science fiction adventure, but it is so lighthearted and charming. If I get depressed, I just go reread that, and I'm
Yeah.
like 15 again, and kind of get to go back in time. I wouldn't say, I wouldn't say Desert Island, but kind of going back into the other, we were talking about other authors who I kind of liked as a kid. Andre Norton, who was Alice Mary Norton,
Yeah.
wrote a bunch of science fiction probably from the 40s, but I'm mostly familiar with her stuff from the 50s to the 70s. I enjoyed that really, really quite a bit too.
Awesome. I should let you go. Before I do, tell us about where we can get your father's books, where we can get these Lost Treasures books. Because like you said, there's a sense of nostalgia about this stuff. It did make me feel like I was 15 again and, picking up this stuff for the first time. I just love this kind of stuff because it's so entertaining. It's so easy to get into. And it's just, I don't know, I just love this stuff.
Well, so you can go to louislamour.com. So that's LOUISLAMOUR.com. No capitals, no apostrophe, just the letters. And you can find all kinds of information there about Louis. You can buy books from directly from our website.
Yeah.
And you can buy audio directly from our website. And there's several other websites. There's a bar at the top, and one of it says additional websites, and you can look into more details on some of the audio productions we've done, more details on a beautiful graphic novel we did a few years ago. There's websites on all of those things. So there's a lot of information there.
Brilliant. And you've got your own website as well, right?
My own website is kind of meaningless. It's more of a resume.
Yeah.
It's more of a professional thing. It's like, you want to know something about me? It's like, here, go to this thing. And, if you want, you can go to beauL'Amour.com, but it's mostly like Beau went to film school and he did this and he did that. And it's not, it's not all that exciting.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you, and congratulations on these Lost Treasures books, because I really, really enjoyed looking through them.
Oh, you're so welcome. And thank you for having me. And I feel like it's just a little bit of a trip back to Australia, where I spent a good deal of time, and I really enjoyed myself.
Thanks once again to Beau L'Amour. Check out the show notes for all the details. Thanks for listening. We'll be back with the next episode very soon.